Good morning. Do you know how impressive you are? Welcome to the coldest place on earth that we are going to make one of the warmest places on earth as we warm the spaces between us in this time in which we are gathered to be spiritual community together. Come if you are celebrating the gifts of life. Come and be part of this circle if you are carrying the burdens of life. Come and be at home in this community if you are heartbroken by the tragedies and pain of the world this week. Come and be part of this community if you are restless for justice, if you're searching for peace, if you're awaiting some glimpse of grace in the midst of the trouble and beauty of life. Whoever we are, wherever we've been, whatever we have done or failed to do, we are welcome in this place. We are needed in this place. We are together with one another to create spiritual community, to find the things we need, to journey on, to kindle kindness. We gather in this place, honoring this land, Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground, gathering place and traveling route of Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux peoples. We honor the many First Nations whose footsteps have marked this land for centuries. And we celebrate that it has become home to peoples from all over the world who have come here in the hope of finding a better life for children, for families, for futures, for safety, and for security. Together, as partners in Treaty 6, we seek to move forward together, mending the wounds of the past, and being a reconciled and reconciling community as we move into this new decade. I know that there are a few of you that have things you want to share and a few announcements. Chris is going to come and start us off. Thank you for all the ways you contribute, your time and your energies and your talents and your financial means. A reminder of ways we can contribute, and in addition to supporting us in our general revenue by making a contribution online or a check or cash into the boxes at the back, you can also support our work by purchasing grocery cards, and they're available in the foyer today.
Deep in
we light this candle as a spark of possibility, as a flicker of energy, as a reminder that our life depends on light. Sometimes the light is so bright it hurts our eyes. And sometimes the darkness is so deep, it's hard to detect light. We come together with each other in the midst of all that life is, to share the light of song and story, of hope and prayer, and the light of this new day into which each of us was born to shine.
Good morning, everyone. It's time for this time, carpet time, time for all ages. Welcome. Come on up. I'm going to tell you something that you already know. Being nice to each other is a good thing. You already know that. Yeah, you learn that right away. You learn that from your moms and your dads and your grandparents, and you learn that from good people all around you, that to be nice is a wonderful thing. But I want to tell you something else. To be kind to each other and to do kind things for each other is not just kind of nice for you and for the other person. Being kind and doing kind things for another person changes the world. It changes the whole world. I know. It's like being superheroes. And I know it's kind of hard to imagine that, because if we do something nice for a friend or for someone in our family, that's great, and they say thank you, or maybe they smile, and that's lovely. But it's sometimes hard to see what a big difference that can make. So we're going to watch a little video today, and there's no words in this video, there's a song, and there's lots of things to look at. And I want you to see how when you are kind to someone, it keeps going and going and going until it changes the neighborhood, the city, the whole world. Let's watch that, okay? Each other, being kind, doing something wonderful for another person. We don't have to do really big things. They can be really small things, and they can make a difference, a big difference, and they can change the world to be a kinder, beautiful place. And we all have the power. So, are you ready to use your superpowers today? Ready? Kindness superpowers? Awesome. Let's do it. Let's go. We have our program.
The book of Genesis that opens the Hebrew and Christian scriptures contains a number of stories about families. And the book ends with the story of a particular family, the family of Joseph, the one we know from the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And this is how Joseph was reunited with his brothers who had deeply betrayed him. And after the years go by, the story continues with the death of their father. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said to each other, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for the wrong we did to him?" So they went to Joseph and they said, "Your father gave us this instruction before he died. He told us to tell you that he begs you to forgive our crime and the wrong we did in harming you." Joseph wept while they spoke to him, and the brothers also wept. And they fell down before him and they said, "We're here as your servants." But Joseph said, "Do not be afraid. I will provide for you and for your little ones." In this way, he reassured his brothers, speaking kindly to them. In this legendary story of an ancient family, this is a poem entitled "Kindness" by a Palestinian-American poet, Naomi Shihaniv. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand and you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans, and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness is the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it's only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you've been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. In the words of this poet, Do you remember when the cloud stored rain rather than digital data? Do you remember when a tweet was a sound that a bird made rather than a short comment you posted on Twitter? Do you remember when text was a body of written material rather than a short message you typed to someone? And if you're like me, generally you typed a short message to say you're going to be late. Do you remember when a tablet was a pill you swallowed? Or a slab of stone, rather than a small device that you use to search the internet or read your email or run the PowerPoint slides during a spiritual gathering? Do you remember when a noun was the name of a person, place, or thing? And a verb was what generally described an action? For instance, you remember when Google was the name of a company or the name of a search engine rather than a verb used to describe what we do to search for information on the internet? Do you remember when Kindle was something you did to get a fire going rather than an e-book reader you buy from Amazon so you can carry a library in your hands? Although language changes constantly, perhaps what hasn't changed is the truth of the old maximum that actions speak louder than words. So to live more deeply means focusing on the verbs, attending to the actions that reflect how we live our best humanity. What do we kindle in the world? What do we cause to gradually begin? What do we cause to gradually become lit? What do we arouse or inspire? We can kindle anger or suspicion. We can kindle interest in a subject. But irrespective of our age or our capacities or our sphere of influence, we can all kindle kindness. If Henry James was right when he said, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. And the third is to be kind. Then is there anything more important for us to do than to kindle kindness? It has been a heartbreaking start to a new year. With a president kindling old and new hostilities, authoring the death of an Iranian general, not to mention more than 20 other officials in a drone strike. And then the funerals in Tehran kindled even greater grief when more than 56 people were trampled to death and others injured. And then the anxieties of the world were kindled by the retaliation that rained down missiles on military bases in Iraq, with the threat of war looming. And then 176 lives were lost when an airplane was turned into a fireball and fell from the sky. And all of this heartbreak comes while another continent is consumed by wildfires destroying habitat and homes, along with the lives of so many humans and millions perhaps billions of the more than human. In the midst of so much grief and rage, kindled by the actions and inactions of some of our species, we come to a moment today to ponder an archetypal story of a dysfunctional family that found a measure of healing when its primary victim kindled kindness when he could have authored revenge. You know, I've tended to hear this story of the first biblical Joseph as a story of reconciliation that was rooted in a radical act of forgiveness. Remember, we're not talking about the Joseph of our nativity scenes, but the one that the book of Genesis gives us in a long line of troubled brothers, from Cain and Abel, to Isaac and Ishmael, to Jacob and Esau, to Jacob's son Joseph and his tribe of jealous brothers. When I read this story, I've often been focused on the opportunity for retaliation in the plot and missed the simple kindness to which the editor of the story gives just one line very near the end of the tale when he adds that Joseph spoke kindly to his brothers. There's no end of cruelty in this story. It begins with the cruelty of favoritism in a badly blended family. Joseph is the apple of his father's eye, which makes his 11 brothers want to turn him into applesauce. And his father exacerbates the situation by exempting Joseph from the manual labor the others carry out every day. And then Joseph deepens the resentment by arriving at the breakfast table every morning to share his dream of having found himself in some grandiose position of power where his brothers have to bow down to him. So when the opportunity presented itself in the world of the story and the brothers were far from their father's watchful eye, they hatch a plot to kill Joseph once and for all. And then at the last moment, one of the more enterprising brothers saw an opportunity to make a buck and still get Joseph off their eyeball. So he persuaded the others to sell him rather than kill him. So they cashed him in with some traders that were passing through on their way to Egypt. And then they took his distinctive coat and they soaked it in animal blood to support the terrible lie they'll tell their father that Joseph had been killed by some wild animal. And the years go by, and their father grieves. And their secret remains safe because not one of them will break rank. Not one of them will break the code of silence, even though they watch their father's heart break day after day, year after year, believing his child to be dead. Meanwhile, Joseph's been sold again by those traders to a high-ranking official in Egypt. Things go well for him until he's propositioned by his employer's wife and declines her advances. And she doesn't just get angry, she gets even. She frames Joseph, telling her husband that he had solicited her affections. And so in the great world of the melodrama, that's how it was Joseph ended up in prison. It was for a crime he didn't commit. But he had the good fortune to have cellmates who served as informants to the Pharaoh. And Joseph gets to use his skills with interpreting dreams to decode Pharaoh's worst nightmares. And that's what eventually earns him early release. But Joseph not only gains his freedom like the Nelson Mandela of the ancient world, he also rises to political power. In that unbelievable twist of which all good stories are made, hunger brings his brothers to Egypt with the hope of finding food to feed their large and growing families. And now that moment the storyteller prepared us for in the opening scene becomes the turning point of the tale. Just as Hollywood so often does, the storyteller set us up in that innocuous opening scene over the breakfast table where Joseph shares his dreams of being powerful as he passes the cereal. The story reminds us of that scene when it reaches its turning point. And the plot does give Joseph the upper hand. He not only has the power to supply food for their hunger, but he has the advantage of recognizing his siblings, whereas they don't have the first clue that they're actually seeking the help of the brother they betrayed and brutalized and assumed was dead. That's an occasion we've witnessed so many times in our history. When the tables are turned, and what happens next is entirely up to the victims. In this story, it took time and it took tears. It didn't happen all at once, and it didn't happen without great grief. And it wasn't pure as the driven snow. Joseph didn't just look into their eyes and forgive them. There was no instant kindness. He accused them of being spies. He put them in prison for 3 days. He secretly put money back in their sacks, making them worry they'd be accused of theft. He kept one brother in custody in order to force the others to return and bring back his only full brother, the youngest, who was the apple of his mother's eye. And when they returned with Benjamin, he set them up again by framing Benjamin for stealing and then forcing them to bring their father to Egypt. He concealed his identity. He grieved in private. He tormented them until something moved him to a higher humanity. Until something moved him to kindle kindness. Maybe it was self-preservation. Maybe he came to recognize that he was doing more damage to his own soul than he was doing to his family. Whatever it was, in slow, incremental movements, Joseph released his resentment and revealed himself to his brothers and reinstated himself in a family that had rejected him. And he arranged to be reunited with his father, and he provided the opportunity for his brothers not just to survive, but to thrive. And that fragile forgiveness could have unraveled when their father died. And their brothers began to fear that in the absence of pleasing their father, Joseph just might retaliate and return cruelty for cruelty, hatred for hatred. So never without a scheme or a lie up their sleeve, they play the very best card in their deck. And they claim that their father's deathbed wish was for Joseph to forgive them. Whether it's Joseph wanting to meet his father's expectations even in death, or whether it was just doing the right thing, the story doesn't tell us. Whether he saw through their charade or he bought it hook, line, and sinker, the story doesn't tell us. But for whatever reason, after many tears were shed, he spoke kindly to them. Kindness is not always easy. It's often inconvenient. It's frequently a rebellion against our first instincts. It's usually a choice. To speak or act kindly takes intention. It requires an element of risk. We don't know what we offer, whether it will be received or rejected, whether it will be valued or unnoticed. Kindness isn't a very sexy virtue. In a culture that's addicted to immediate responses, it's sometimes a radical act to take the time to consider how to speak kindly without sacrificing honesty. And in a culture that's consumed with self-interest and self-care, it's often a radical act to initiate kindness. And being kind, it's not the same thing as being nice. The etymology of our language gives us a really big clue that kindness wraps itself around the notion of being kin. That kindness has something, maybe everything, to do with treating each other as we would treat our kin, as we would treat our own kind, as we would treat ourselves, or as we would wish to be treated. And the poet, Naomi Shihadnai, she understands that intimate relationship between kindness and suffering. Surely the ancient storyteller tells us that Joseph's capacity for kindness was rooted in his deep suffering. His story bears witness to the poet's truth. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside you, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. Few of us are in positions of power to change the world. But each of us has the ability to kindle kindness in the spaces we inhabit. Each of us, however old, however young, whatever our capacities, we're equipped with what is needed to change the world a meter at a time. It's just called kindness. And it's simple, but it's not easy. And small acts of kindness are acts that gradually begin something, light something, inspire something. Kindness is kindled more than it is ignited. It's a small start that can become a big blaze. In a mean world, we can kindle almost anything. But what better thing to kindle than the three things that are most important in human life? To be kind, to be kind, to be kind. in words crafted by our friends at West Hill United Church. We strengthen our intentions, we pray together, offering the words we find before us. As I live every day, I want to be a channel for peace. May I bring love where there is hatred, and healing where there is hurt, joy where there is sadness, and hope where there is fear. I pray that I may always try to understand and comfort other people, wherever possible, standing from them. Wherever possible, may I choose to be a light in the darkness, a help in times of need, a caring, honest friend, and may justice, kindness, and peace flow through my heart forever. Amen. We each have 3 meters of influence. The way to change the world 3 meters at a time. In the circles in which we live and move and have our being, friends, families, strangers, those we stand in line with, those whose lives have touched ours around the world this week, whose stories resonate, whose lost potential breaks our hearts. We can lead this great turning, kindling kindness in our circles of influence, and lead with love.